It started as a regular evening, one of those nights where the daily hustle was finally winding down. Dinner dishes were still drying on the counter, and Vera, my lively 5-year-old daughter, had been unusually quiet all day. I noticed her cheeks were flushed, and her small frame seemed too tired to move much. I told myself it was probably nothing, a little fever, maybe, or just a cold. But as the hours went on, her condition worsened. She was burning up, her breaths shallow and quick. That once lively spark in her big, curious eyes had dimmed. I felt panic creeping in. I pressed my hand to her forehead, and it was like touching an open flame. "Vera, baby, we're going to the hospital," I said, scooping her into my arms. She gave a faint whimper but said nothing. That silence, so unlike her, terrified me more than anything else. The rain was relentless as I drove. Every stoplight felt like an eternity, every second a moment stolen from my daughter. I kept glancing back at her, watching her little chest rise and fall unevenly. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as I whispered promises to her. "Mommy's going to get you help. Just hold on, okay? Just a little longer." The emergency room came into view, and I parked as close as I could, sprinting through the rain with Vera in my arms. The automatic door slid open, and I was hit by a flood of noise and fluorescent light. The waiting room was packed. People sat in chairs, coughing, groaning, some clutching injuries wrapped in makeshift bandages. But my focus was on the front desk. "Please," I said, my voice trembling as I approached the receptionist. "My daughter is very sick. She has a high fever, and she's struggling to breathe." The receptionist didn't even look at Vera. She handed me a clipboard. "Fill this out and take a seat," she said, her tone clipped and robotic. "Fill this out," I repeated, incredulous. "She can't wait. Please. Someone needs to see her right now." "You'll be called when it's your turn," the receptionist replied, clearly annoyed. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't waste time arguing. I grabbed the clipboard and sat down, holding Vera close as I scribbled down the information. Her little body felt impossibly hot against me, and every shallow breath she took felt like it was costing her more than she had to give. Finally, a nurse appeared, a tall, stiff-looking woman whose badge read Nancy. My heart leapt with hope. I stood up as she approached, clutching Vera tightly. "What seems to be the problem?" Nancy asked, her tone sharp and disinterested. "My daughter is very sick," I began, my words tumbling out in a rush. "She has a high fever, and she's having trouble breathing. Please, I need someone to see her now." Nancy glanced at Vera briefly, her expression unreadable. "You'll have to wait. We're short-staffed tonight." "Wait? She can't wait." My voice cracked. "Look at her, she's burning up." Nancy didn't even blink. I said wait, she repeated, her tone icy, before turning and walking away. I stared after her, stunned. My child was fighting to breathe, and she had walked away as if we were invisible. As Vera's condition worsened, I felt a desperation I can't describe. I stood, pacing the waiting room, glancing at the nurse's station every few seconds. When a younger nurse walked by, I stepped in front of him, tears streaming down my face. "Please," I begged, holding Vera closer. "My daughter needs help. She's getting worse." The young nurse looked at Vera and immediately sprang into action. "I'll get a doctor right away," he said, his voice filled with urgency. Within minutes, a team was surrounding Vera. They worked quickly, hooking her up to oxygen, starting an IV, and taking her temperature. I stood by her side, clutching her hand, whispering reassurances. "It's going to be okay, baby. Mommy's here. They're going to make you better." As the doctors worked, I heard a voice from the hallway. "Why are they even bothering with her?" Nancy said. "People like that always exaggerate. She's probably fine." My blood ran cold. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized what she meant by people like that. It wasn't just negligence, it was hatred. After they stabilized Vera and moved her to a quieter area, I couldn't stay silent. I found Nancy near the nurse's station, her back turned to me. My hands were shaking as I approached her. "Nancy," I said, my voice trembling with anger. She turned, her expression neutral. "Yes. Why didn't you help my daughter?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I followed protocol," she said, crossing her arms. "We're short-staffed, and you need to understand that. Understand that? I repeated, incredulous. My daughter could have died because you refused to help her. Nancy shrugged. You were being dramatic. She was fine. She wasn't fine. I shouted, my voice cracking. You didn't even look at her. You didn't care. Nancy smirked, brushing past me without another word. That night, as Vera slept soundly for the first time in days, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, writing down every detail of what had happened. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let Nancy or anyone else think they could treat my daughter, or anyone else, like that and get away with it. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with the hospital administrator. Sitting across from him in his pristine office, I recounted everything: the receptionist's indifference, Nancy's refusal to help, the hateful comment I overheard. My daughter could have died, I said, my voice trembling. This wasn't just negligence. It was racism. The administrator listened, nodding occasionally, but his response felt hollow. We'll investigate this thoroughly, Mrs. Johnson, he said. But I wasn't convinced. Too often, complaints like mine were ignored or brushed aside. I reached out to Sarah, a journalist known for exposing injustices. I met with her at a local cafe, where I recounted this story in painstaking detail. This isn't just about me and Vera, I said, tears streaming down my face. How many other families have been ignored or mistreated because of prejudice? This needs to stop. Sarah's article went viral. The community rallied around us, sharing the story and demanding accountability. Other patients came forward, sharing their own experiences of mistreatment at the hospital. Protests erupted, with signs reading, "Justice for Vera and End Racism in Healthcare." Under immense public pressure, the hospital conducted a thorough investigation. Nancy was terminated, and the hospital implemented new training programs to address bias and discrimination. My fight didn't end there. I began speaking at rallies, sharing my story, and urging others to stand up against injustices. I'll never forget what happened to Vera, and I'll never stop fighting to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. If you've ever faced injustice, or if you've seen someone treated unfairly, I want to hear from you. Share your story. Together, we can shine a light on these issues and demand a system where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Your voice matters. Let's make sure it's heard.